Today is video lesson number 23, and today's lesson is on the measures of central tendency. For today's lesson, you will need the notes you were given in class, TOC number 23, a pencil or pen to take notes, a highlighter, marker, or colored pencil to be able to highlight some key terms, and you will be using a calculator. So if you don't have one at home, you may want to use your phone. All right, let's get started. For the measures of central tendency, these numbers can be used to describe the center of the data. For the most common of these measures, of course, being mean, median, and mode. And all of those, mean, median, and mode, are describing the center of a set of data. And data are just different pieces of numerical data specifically, because you can't find the mean and the median if it's not numerical. Okay, just to refresh your memory, because this has been something that you had in previous years, the mean is the sum of the numbers in a set of data divided by the number of items in the pieces, or the number of items in the pieces of data, or pieces of data. So, like if I had 5 numbers, I'd add up all 5 numbers and then divide by the number 5, because there were 5 data pieces. I want you to highlight the word balance point, because the balance point is also another word that we use to describe the mean. Another one that we use to describe is also the average. And if you think of it this way, the mean teacher always averages your grades. So whoever your math teacher is, think of us as being that mean teacher. Mean, get it? And we do the average of your grades. So mean and average are adding up all of your grades and then dividing by how many total grades that you have. And here's an example of what I mean. For the measures of central tendency, for the mean, we have John, Peter, Mark, Sam, and Vincent. Their ages are 31, 30, 26, 21, and 10. So to find the mean, or the average, I'm going to add up all the ages, 31 plus 30 plus 26 plus 21 plus 10, and then I'm going to divide by how many different people there were, which is John, Peter, Mark, Sam, and Vincent. There were 5 people. So once I add those all up, I get 118. I'm going to divide by 5, and when I do that, I get a decimal. Most of the time, you will get a decimal answer with your mean, because those numbers are not going to be divided evenly on all of them. So if you get a decimal, it's okay. Sometimes read your instructions, because they may say round to the nearest tenth, or round to the nearest hundredth, or round to the nearest whole number. So just be careful and make sure you're giving what they ask for. The median is the middle number in a set of data when the data has been arranged in ascending order. Just to refresh your memory, ascending means going from least to greatest, or smallest to biggest. If the data has an even number, so when you find the middle, you're going to you can do a couple things. Cross out the numbers as you go. Cross out one from the beginning, one from the end, and keep going until you get to that middle number. Or you can use your fingers and just kind of inch them in toward each other, and then when you get to the last number, that's your median. But sometimes you have 2 numbers in the middle, and if that's the case, then you're going to add those 2 numbers together and then divide by 2. So you find the mean of the 2 middle numbers. And remember, you always are putting all the numbers in order from least to greatest to find the number in the middle. That's the first step. So here is an example using the same data set that we just had, John, Peter, Mark, Sam, and Vincent. We're going to put them in order from least to greatest, which is kind of easy because they're in order already, just backwards. So it becomes 10, 21, 26, 30, 31. Now all we have to do is move in, and our middle number would be 26. So that is our median. And the last measure of central tendency would be the mode. And Ms. Dunn has a funny story that we'll explain about a la mode. But another easy way to remember it is mode, M-O-D-E, is the one that appears most often. So think of mode as M-O, most often. They both start with M and O. So basically, it's the most popular answer. And this is really only used to measure the center when most of the data, and I'm talking most meaning over 50% of the data, is the same number. And it's important to note, put a little note somewhere on your notes in a marker, colored, or highlighter, that you can have up to 2 different modes, because sometimes you're going to have 2 different numbers that occur more than once, and you're going to pick the one that happens the most. If you have more than 2 modes, then it is actually considered not having a mode at all. So you can also have no mode, so it's important that you note that as well. All right, so looking at this example, we have, this is not in your notes, so just pay attention for a second. This says the mode is the most frequent value, so you count how many of each value appears. The mode is the value that appears the most, and you can have more than one mode. So if you look at the example on the left, we have 2, 2, 3, 5, 5, 7, 8. It's important that you notice these are all, they put them in order from least to greatest, just like you do for the median. And if you look at this example, we have 2 2s and we have 2 5s. So this one has 2 modes. Both the 2 and the 5 are considered the mode. If you look at the example on the right, we have example 1 that has 5, 8, 13, 15, 17. None of the numbers are repeated, so we say it has no mode. Don't put 0 as your mode, because there's no 0 in the data set. You just say no mode. It's like going getting pie and saying, nope, no ice cream. You actually say, no, I don't want ice cream. You don't go zip. So say no mode. In example number 2, we had 3 was repeated 3 different times. So because that occurred the most, that was the most popular answer. For example number 2, you're not going to choose that as your best measure of central tendency because it only occurs 3 times and there is a set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers. So 3 is not half of the data, so that would not be the center. Another important vocabulary word you need to know is something called an outlier. And these are numbers that are outside the bulk or the part of the group, the major part of the group. And an outlier affects the mean. So what that means is these are the numbers that are way too big or way too small that kind of break out of the crowd. So think of these as the students that are really, really, really smart and always get A's, and then or the people that really struggle in class and they are the ones that are getting really low scores on every single test. So, or you can think of it as the people that have a whole lot of money and someone who doesn't have any money, you know, but most of us have some money, but it can vary. So those outliers are the liars that kind of mess up everybody's data. So if we look at these examples, 20, 22, 1, 33, 27, 100, and 28, all of our numbers are between 20 and 33, except 1 and 100. And there is a formula that you can use to determine if something's an outlier. We're not going to go into that detail, but if a number is like way outside the group of the numbers, like 1 and 100 in this example, then those would be considered the liars. So those are outliers in the data. Okay, the big thing you have to know, because you already have done mean, median, mode, and range in the past years in 5th grade, but you have to, in 6th grade, know when to use which measure. Of course, mean, we are adding up all the averages, or adding up all the numbers and averaging them together through using division. And that's important. You can use that when there are no outliers. If you have a liar, an outlier, a liar, in the data set, that is going to mess up your data, because a really low number is going to make your grade drop a whole lot. If you have a really high number, it's going to make your center of your data seem higher than it actually is. So if there's no outliers, then we use the mean. However, if there are outliers, then we would use the median. So I want you to go ahead and highlight for the mean that we use when there are no outliers, but the median, we use that one when there are outliers. The other thing is you want to look that to make sure to use the median if there are no big gaps in the middle of the data. So that means you're not jumping from 10, 12, 15, and then skipping like 30 numbers and jumping to 60, 75, 80, and having all those numbers in the middle be skipped, because then that's not a good measure of center, because you, depending on where your average falls, then, you know, in the middle. And then the mode, of course, the only time you're really going to use the mode is if the data has many identical numbers, or they're asking for the favorite, or they're asking for something like that, the most popular. You'll know when you would use the mode there. All right, the last one that we're going to review, and this is not a measure of central tendency. It's always assumed that it is, because when you talk about mean, median, mode, everybody always says mean, median, mode, and range. But the range is the distance or the difference between the greatest and the least number. That has nothing to do with the center of the data. That is just the distance between those two numbers. So range, I want you to highlight and put a big, huge star and underline it, is not a measure of central tendency. Again, put a big, huge star next to this, highlight it, underline it. Range is not a measure of central tendency. And it is simply just the highest number minus the lowest number. It's the distance. It's like the absolute value. Absolute value is the distance between a number and 0. This is just the distance between the highest number and the lowest number. How many things are between that? So if we look at this example, we have a data set that's 3, 4, 5, 5, 6. The highest number is 6, the lowest number is 3. If I take 6 and 3, that's saying there are 3 numbers or 3 values between those two. It has nothing to do with the center of the data. That is just the distance between those two. It lets you know the spread of the data. So if I said ages of the students in 6th grade, you're not going to have a very big range. But if I said what are the ages of the teachers at Tab Middle School, you're going to have a lot bigger range, because you got some people who are really old or have been teaching a long time, and then some that have just got out of college that are teaching and they're young, they're in their 20s. So you're talking 60s to 20s, you're going to have 40 years. Versus the students in 6th grade, where you're going to have maybe 2 to 3 years max, depending on when birthdays fall. And that's all, folks. It's time to show what you know. Log in and take that homework quiz to show us what you understand. You will need a calculator for that homework quiz, so make sure you have one handy.